In the winter of 1985, a small family living deep in the mountains of the Philippines discovered a cardboard box on their doorstep. There was no address, no note, only a single VHS tape, wrapped neatly and labeled in pen, "For the children of the house." That night, the family gathered in front of their old television. The father slid the tape into the player. The screen filled with static. A gentle hum drifted from the speakers, followed by a soft, cheerful melody. Then the image sharpened. A puppet family, smiling beneath blinding studio lights. They called it Life with Grandpa. It looked harmless. The voices were sweet. The set was colorful. The message seemed wholesome. But what this family didn't know, and what hundreds of families across the world would soon learn, is that Life with Grandpa wasn't a show at all. It was a tool, a test, an instrument of control disguised as a children's program. By the time people realized what it truly was, the damage had already been done. The show followed a group of puppets living together in a small, cheerful home. Grandpa, the kind old patriarch, his gentle wife, Mother Maria, and their 3 children, Davida, Tet, and little Davidito. Each episode opened with a hymn about faith, obedience, and love. But there was something unsettling about it. The puppets moved like living things, jerky yet deliberate, their wide plastic eyes never blinking, their smiles never faded, even when the dialogue turned strange. The air around them felt claustrophobic, as if the set itself were suffocating. Every lesson carried a hidden command. Grandpa warned that doctors were dangerous, that medicine was a sign of weak faith. He said pain was holy because God corrects those he loves. He told the children to obey their parents without question and to accept punishment with gratitude. The songs were hypnotic, echoing the same phrase over and over: trust and obey. The more you heard it, the less it sounded like guidance, and the more it felt like brainwashing. For a child, the show was impossible to resist. Simple, warm, comforting. But behind that warmth was something cold, deliberate, and deeply calculated. The man behind the show was David Berg, the founder of a religious cult called the Children of God. Born in 1919, Berg was the son of evangelical missionaries. He started as a preacher but grew obsessed with power, the kind that comes from owning people's souls. In 1968, Berg gathered a group of young wanderers and drifters in California. He promised salvation, love, and purpose to a generation that felt lost. They called themselves the Family. He called himself Grandpa. By the early 1970s, Berg had convinced thousands to give up their homes, their families, and their possessions. He banned television, newspapers, and contact with outsiders, isolating his followers completely. When U.S. authorities began to take notice, he fled overseas, sending his disciples to live in communes scattered across more than 70 countries. Outside of the law, Berg's control became absolute. He created a world filled only with his words, handwritten sermons, illustrated letters, songs, and homemade videos. Every child born into the group grew up seeing only what Berg wanted them to see. Life with Grandpa was his crown jewel, a way to shape the youngest minds into perfect followers long before they could even read. Berg preached something he called the law of love. According to him, any act done in love was blessed by God, no matter who it involved or how unsettling it seemed. He claimed that love had no limits, and neither should its expression. What began as a philosophy of compassion soon became a justification for manipulation. He instructed the women in his group to evangelize through what he described as flirty fishing. They were told to form relationships with outsiders and bring them into the faith, believing that affection could be a path to salvation. Those who questioned his teachings risked being cast out. If they resisted, they were told that suffering was a divine test of devotion. Inside the communes, his doctrine began to take on darker forms. boundaries blurred. The message of love turned into control. Adults were drawn into practices Berg described as sharing the love, erasing distinctions between spiritual and personal life. He urged followers to expose even their children early to his ideas, teaching that innocence was ignorance and that God's love should be experienced, not just understood. Over time, these beliefs were used to justify disturbing behavior. Private materials and recordings were circulated among members as spiritual inspiration, reinforcing loyalty and obedience. And while life with Grandpa appeared harmless on the surface, its underlying purpose was the same: to condition followers into unquestioning submission, so that when true horror arrived, they wouldn't fight back. The puppets were not fictional. Each one represented someone real inside the cult. Grandpa was Berg himself, the prophet, the father, the voice of God. Mother Maria was Karen Zerby, Berg's second wife, and the woman who would inherit the cult after his death. Davida, Tet, and Davidito were modeled after the children living with them in the commune. Davida was Berg's 5-year-old stepdaughter. He called her his little queen. He claimed their bond was spiritual, but in reality, he treated her as his child bride. Davidito, the boy who smiled into the camera and told stories about prayer, was Ricky Rodriguez, Berg's chosen successor, the child who would grow up to expose the cult from within. To outsiders, the show looked like harmless religious entertainment, but to those inside, it was a symbol of something sacred and untouchable. The puppets were holy, Grandpa's voice was divine, and questioning it meant damnation. Ricky Rodriguez's life was documented from birth in a 700-page book titled The Story of Davidito. The book, circulated among cult members, claimed to be a parenting guide inspired by divine revelation. In truth, it was a detailed chronicle of his abuse. It described how Ricky was taught about love by adults, forced to observe and participate in acts he could not comprehend. It depicted his mother and her friends as his teachers, praising them for removing the barriers of shame. Photographs accompanied the text: smiling faces, soft lighting, the illusion of happiness. Every page was horror disguised as holiness. When the book leaked to the public in the 1980s, the world was stunned. It was undeniable proof of systematic abuse, but Berg had vanished into hiding, moving from country to country under false names. Few members dared to leave. Those who tried were hunted, shamed, and threatened with damnation. The authorities could do little. The children of God existed everywhere and nowhere. As Ricky grew older, faith became a prison. The songs and lessons that had shaped his childhood turned into nightmares that followed him through adulthood. He escaped the cult in his 20s, trying to rebuild his life in the United States. He found love, made friends, even tried to start over. But trauma has a way of whispering when the world goes quiet. He wrote about sleepless nights and the sound of that old television hum. He said he could still hear Grandpa's voice, echoing in his head, telling him to obey. He couldn't escape the ghosts of the people who had stolen his childhood. In January 2005, Ricky recorded a final message. He spoke calmly, his voice steady but broken. He said he wanted justice, for himself, for the other children, for the lives destroyed by the cult. Then he found one of his abusers, confronted her, and killed her. Hours later, he took his own life. The news hit the world like a shockwave. For the first time, the public saw the reality behind Berg's smiling sermons. Ricky Rodriguez, once the holy child, had become the ultimate witness, his death a final testimony to the horrors he had endured. One of the creators of Life with Grandpa was a man known as Peter Puppet. He was a loyal member of the cult and one of its most enthusiastic performers. He believed his work was saving souls. He built the puppets by hand, painted their faces and sang their songs. But devotion has a cost. Years later, he developed a tumor in his neck. Doctors told him it could be safely removed, but medical treatment was forbidden. The cult demanded faith over science. He prayed. The tumor grew. It pressed against his windpipe, deforming his neck and making it difficult to breathe. Photographs from his final months show him pale and gaunt, his throat grotesquely swollen. He begged to see a doctor. They refused. He suffocated slowly, surrounded by people singing hymns for a miracle that never came. Even in death, he obeyed. After Berg's death in 1994, Karen Zerby assumed leadership. She ordered followers to destroy all evidence that could incriminate them. The letters, the videos, the photographs, thousands of tapes were burned in secret. Only a few fragments survived, but the cult did not die. It rebranded itself as the Family International and claimed to have reformed. Publicly, they spoke of repentance. Privately, they continued to hide. Survivors still carry the scars. Many refuse to speak. Others tell stories of sleepless nights, of phantom songs echoing through their dreams, of memories that don't feel like memories, but warnings. They describe the smell of old VHS plastic, the faint warmth of static on their faces, the eerie comfort of the puppets who once taught them how to smile. Most of them can't pray anymore. Some can't love, and none can forget. Life with Grandpa was never a television show. It was a mask, a cheerful puppet stage hiding a machine built to control. It weaponized faith, turning worship into obedience and obedience into silence. It taught children to smile while they were being destroyed, to call their suffering love, and to believe that every bruise was a blessing. The tape that arrived on that doorstep in 1985 wasn't a message of hope. It was the sound of 1,000 lies humming beneath the surface of a hymn. It was evil, not loud or fierce, but gentle, soothing, patient. The kind of evil that doesn't need to shout because it sings. Today, most of those tapes are gone, eaten by time and dust. But their legacy lingers in the lives they touched, in the survivors who wake up trembling, in the silence that follows when someone mentions the words trust and obey. Faith can heal, but blind faith, faith demanded, forced, and twisted, can destroy generations. Evil doesn't always wear horns. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it speaks softly about love. Sometimes it holds a puppet in its hands and calls itself holy. The children who once laughed with Grandpa learned that too late. Because the darkest kids show ever made wasn't about saving souls. It was about taking them